Now, we live in a world full of diverse card game designs, and choosing what is objectively the best design is an impossible task, so we have to go with subjective design. So today we are going to be taking a look at practical designs versus aesthetically pleasing designs to see if we can find something in the middle that is a combination of these two essential parts of making a TCG. Now, the first thing we're going to focus on is card art to information ratio. Now, look at this card. We have lots of space for information, but the art is so small and squished up and out of the way, there's not really much of a feel there, so we don't quite get an initial connection with that card. And here is another example of the same ratio, except I would say that moving the art further down draws the attention further away from what we should be focusing on. That initial impulse, the emotion that we get from the cards is from the art, and that should be the centerpiece of your card. Don't size down your card art and make it an insignificant part of the card itself. Now, I know this is a character sheet, but I think it is a good example of ratio as well. So we can see that the art here is taking up a very small fraction, about a quarter of the card. But look at all the information that we can fit in. Practically, this is a perfect card because you can just get so much information, so much detail on a card. You can make the cards do anything you want. There's so much flexibility from a creator's point of view. But from an aesthetically pleasing point of view, this would be very impractical to put on a small card. Now, I do know the character sheets in D&D are much bigger, and that's why the ratios are more fulfilling that way. But to use it as an example for a card, you wouldn't design the aesthetics of your card this way. So on a ratio of practicality to aesthetics, I would give practicality a whopping big 8, but aesthetics a very low 2. We want to aim for something a little bit closer to the middle. Now, here is an example of an extreme going the opposite way, leaning into aesthetics. Yes, I know it is a token, but tokens do lean very highly into aesthetics. But take a look, the art engulfs the whole card itself with very little information in the lower text here. Sacrifice the artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And in the very top part there, just saying treasure, so you know what it is. And even that is being partly covered up by the art. It is very aesthetically pleasing card. I would give this a 9 for aesthetics versus a 1 for practicality. Now, let's not forget this is a token, so you can afford to lean into the aesthetics for a token, because tokens don't do anything too diverse. Remember, with any of this advice, it is always situational. There is always a situation where more aesthetics is better than practicality, and more practicality is better than aesthetics. Sometimes we want more information, and sometimes we just want beautiful art to admire. So never forget to put yourself in the player's shoes and think, is this what I want the most out of this trading card game? Now let's move on to Doomshade Obelisk. Now this card has keywords highlighted on the card itself. Practicality wise, this is fantastic because it allows players to scan the card much faster. If the correct keyword is there, they know what they're searching for, then they can speed up gameplay. This is an excellent tool to use when making a trading card game. And aesthetically, this doesn't interfere with the card art. So here is another example from Hearthstone where they'll just put the important information in bold text. This is a design that Lorcana's leaned into as well, with the example of Final Enchantment. The information on what the card does afterwards is right there. Now the Digimon card game take it a little step further. As well as having the highlighted words here, we have color coded words as well. So when digivolving right here is actually a trigger, which is why it is highlighted in that state, compared to Armor Purge and Blocker, which are main keywords. They are a result of something, so not a trigger. If you as a player learn many shapes and colors to a card game, then reading the cards become that much faster and simpler. Now, another quality of life aesthetic that I really enjoy in trading card games are these little lines here, just to break up text. Now, in this card, we can see that it is breaking up the flavor text versus the practical side of the card, the effect of the card. Now, I wouldn't say this is necessary because the flavor text is in a different font anyway, but it is nice to just have things broken up. Now, we don't just need to add a line. Take a look at this card. We have a line, but we have a little bit of flair to it. There's a little bit more aesthetics. It takes up very little space, but then just adds something a little bit more pleasing and thematic to the eye. Now, I can definitely see myself doing something like this in my up and coming card game design. So it seems like a small thing, but is good for breaking up multiple effects. It is good for breaking up effects versus flavor text, and it is good for breaking up effects that have different levels of strength. Say that you might have a higher outcome if you pay a higher cost into the card. You can have effects dividing up those different costs. And here is another example of using the divider to underline the title of your card's effect, breaking up the flavor text to the card. So as we can see, there are a few cards that use this divider in slightly different ways. If you can think of another creative way to incorporate a divider into your card game, please put in the comment section below. And if you have an example, give me that example so I can check it out for myself. Thank you very much. Now, this is a design that we're seeing more and more often in card games. What we have here is floating text versus text that is in a square box. Now, to separate the two means that there has to be something different about the two. Obviously, with this card here, it is foreign, so we can't really decipher much from it. We're also going to be covering the full art aspect, because the floating text is fantastic to have on the full art, which is something you want to do, and you tend to go borderless, which is something that we're going to cover after you hit the like and subscribe button. Now, but if we take a look at this and then we compare it to the Digimon one that we looked at earlier, you can see that they have floating text as well. Now, this one isn't the best example because it is all floating text, but if we look at another example of Digimon here, we can see that part of it is floating text and part of it is in a solid box. The reason for this is that it is an inherited effect. So when you digivolve in Digimon, you gain the inherited effect, which is the box at the bottom, which needs to remain separate from the other information. I suppose this is another way of tying it into the dividers. Though this isn't a very extreme divider, it is still a divider in some way. I would still stick to the nice subtle lines though. I think that's quite nice. But I think if you have effects that come into play at different parts of the game, then this is a good way of dividing it up. Now, moving on to what I said before, we're going to be taking a look at the art, going more full art. So do you like borders around your TCG, or do you like your TCG to be borderless? Well, why not both? Digimon has incorporated both into their trading card game. Normally when you have alternate art, they like to remove the border to emphasize more of the art, because if it's all art, it should be, I suppose, more valuable. You should see more of the art itself. So we can go from this example, which will be in an alt art, as we can see by the Borderless, to a non-alt art where it is just slightly covered. You know, when this border doesn't really serve a purpose, why not reward your players by removing it to emphasize the alternate art, which tends to be rare, valuable art on cards, and it gives your players that something a little bit more, that's something a little bit special. But let's say that you have a more detailed border like this beautiful one right here, you might not want to be removing it, which is fair enough. It is about the balance of your own trading card game, and I am just offering an alternative to what you could be doing, trying to think outside of the box, or border, should we say. Now, if you're not sure whether to go borders or borderless, this is something that I would consider to be a little bit in between. I mean, somebody else could look at this and go, this is a border, but I just love having this open space on either side, which just stretches out the depth of what you can do with art. So just having this top border like this and this bottom border like this is something that I might lean into with battle shards. But this is a lovely stripped back layered border design. I love that we just have this 3 layers worth of border right here for different parts of the information. And then coupled with a non-intrusive beautiful pattern that doesn't get in the way of any of the information itself. And then if we have anything extra, we've got floating little text bubble things, which remind me of like Facebook Messenger and things like that. You know, they're just little pop-up bubbles. You feel like you can just move them out of the way. They don't really feel like they're there until you're seeking the information. So I think we'll end by calling this a semi-borderless card. Sometimes it is just done with the vertical parts like this, and then sometimes it can go in this direction where we have the top bit that is clear of the border as well. Usually this bit of information wouldn't be here. You would just have this one simple block at the bottom that would cover the whole bottom. But actually, if we take a look at this, it is completely all borderless. Everything is on the inside of the card, or at least the eye drawing parts are. But if you have your heart set on designing borders, there are plenty of designs online. Don't just go with a plain square shape, you know. We are too creative as human beings to just stick with a simple block shape. So take a look at some of these, even just curving the edges. This is probably the most basic card, but we're still seeing a little bit of something that we would call aesthetically pleasing. With this one, we're getting more creative here. I like this one, just for the simple way that we are breaking up the plain square shape on each of these cards. Right here, we have some lovely curves. Now, even if you are to go simple and square like this card, you can just add that little bit of extra aesthetic, that little bit of style to the card that just ties it into the theme of your game. I mean, just take a look at the very top left of this card. It is a simple square, but they've added 2 little frames here. This breaks up the card in an aesthetically pleasing way. And does it intrude on the information? No. And does it cover up more of the card art? Yes. But it is intruding on the background of the art. It isn't taking away anything from this beautiful design right in the center of the card itself. And to finish off, if you don't think that you have a high level of art to be able to make such great detailed pieces of work, look at this beautiful piece of art. Now, look at this corner. This is a random squiggle, but it looks good. So sometimes you can just do something very 2D, just put it in a corner, and it just breaks up the card in some way that for some reason our brains say, yes, we like this. You know, this is not an intricate design. If you're ever struggling for things like this, just search for pattern designs. There are so many different designs which are either like asymmetric, isometric, just waviness, or just a nature theme, pattern theme, stone themed. You can be inspired by tech and do nuts and bolts. You can be inspired by nature and do stag antlers in the corner. If you like that cyberpunk look, keep it square, make it glow. There is so many different ways we can lean into simple designs. They don't have to always draw the eye away from the important parts of the card. But what I'm saying is we don't need to bore the card player either. So go out there, make something beautiful to show off to the world, and I want to thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I've been James, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.